matter? It's gone a funny colour.
It's all red.
Oh, it'll be my mother's bed socks.
On the 13th of May 1964, Coronation Street made the biggest mistake in its history. Martha Longhurst, one of British television's most beloved characters, died alone in the snug of the Rover's return while everyone else celebrated in the next room. The actress who played her, Lynne learned about her character's death from newspaper reports. Rather than being told directly, and for the next 26 years, until her own death, Carol remained bitter about what had been done to her and to Martha. A 29-year-old producer, desperate to make his mark, killed off an iconic character for publicity, sparked a caste rebellion, and created what later producers would call the street's greatest mistake.
May you be forgiven.
Here, take it.
Right. Now get.
What do you mean?
What I say.
Episode 2 on the 14th of December, 1960, brought Martha Longhurst to screens just days after Coronation Street premiered. There, she appeared in her hairnet and horn-rimmed spectacles, gossiping away in the Rovers, and over the next 3.5 years, she turned up in 299 episodes to become absolutely essential to the program. 1/3 of the legendary Snug Trio, that's what Martha represented. Her, Ina Sharples, and Minnie Caldwell sitting around that table in the Rovers, drinking milk stout and tearing everyone's character to shreds, became television gold.
You might well say, oh.
I thought you was a ghost.
Well, your luck's out. And I thank you for the return of my feather duster.
Creator Tony Warren conceived these three women very deliberately, explaining that whenever you got tough old viragos like Ina, they always had henchmen. Generally, a talkative one that could be shouted down, and a silent one who nodded but was a bit rebellious. Martha played the talkative one, the woman who could match Ina's acid tongue before being eventually silenced. The chemistry between these three created television magic. Scriptwriters reportedly told them they didn't even need to think about scenes for them, because as soon as viewers saw those three chairs round the table, that was it. You can make it funny without meaning to, just by being ordinary. Len Fairclough described Martha perfectly when he said she always looked as though she'd lost a quid and found a halfpenny.
I've got plans of my own. I'm off to Spain.
Oh, that's grand. I'm going to give a party to all my friends in the street.
Martha worked as a cleaner at the Rovers and lived alone at 7 Maudsley Street. A widow who gossiped viciously about everyone, while underneath all that bitter talk, remained a pathetic figure, dreaming of romance and a better life, forever disappointed by reality. Behind Martha stood an extraordinary actress. Born Josephine Caroline, Gertrude Mary, Faith Harbour, on the 29th of June, 1914, in Usk, Monmouthshire. While her actor parents were touring with a stage play, Lynne Carroll came from 6 generations of actors stretching back to the reign of Charles I. 9 days old when she made her stage debut, carried on by her mother, Carol was performing by age 3. The 46-year-old Carol transformed herself into the 64-year-old Martha for Coronation Street, an 18-year age difference achieved through remarkable costume work that Carol purchased from jumble sales herself.
That's a washing machine, you know, not a television. Oh, I like watching them going round. I think it's very interesting the way they do it.
The hairnet, the beret, the horn-rimmed spectacles, the old Macintosh that defined the character, all came bought second-hand. Carol told Weekend magazine there were an awful lot of Marthas in the world, adding that some viewers used to tell me to mind my own business, but most people could see that Martha was really a pathetic old dear. Popularity followed her everywhere. An unpublicized visit to the Ideal Home exhibition caused a near riot, and Carol was advised to leave for her own safety. Sir Laurence Olivier and poet John Betjeman counted themselves among her famous admirers.
I've seen plenty of springtimes in my life, and wet summers.
Martha Longhurst had become a national treasure, which makes what happened next even more baffling. May of '64 brought a new producer to Coronation Street in the form of Tim Aspinall, a 29-year-old former TV Times features writer. Believing the program needed a shake-up, Aspinall implemented what became known as the Bloody Purge of 1964, axing nearly half the cast, with 9 actors shown the door in total. What makes this decision so puzzling is the timing. January of that year saw Coronation Street beaten to first place in the ratings by the BBC's Steptoe and Son for the first time since November of '61. But ratings were actually higher than the same month in '63. Aspinall wasn't saving a struggling program, but disrupting a successful one. Aspinall chose Martha's death for his very first episode as producer, episode 357, calculating that the death would generate publicity and create a talking point in the factories and laundrettes, as writer H.V. Kershaw later put it. Popular, but perhaps viewed as expendable compared to the irreplaceable Ina, Martha became the sacrifice. Margaret Morris, the outgoing producer, delivered the devastating news to several unsuspecting cast members. Lynne Carroll herself, though, was deeply shocked to read in the newspaper that the days of her character were now numbered, not told privately, but publicly humiliated through media reports. The 7th of April arrived with Carroll's firing announced in the press over a month before her final episode would air. Fans mobbed her while out in public, and her dignified public statement said they'd been 3 wonderful years, and I am sorry to be leaving so many good friends behind me. Aspinall assumed Carroll would likely find other acting jobs, dismissive logic that would haunt him for years. The Coronation Street cast fought back. They weren't having Martha killed off without a fight, creating remarkable behind-the-scenes drama that showed just how wrong this decision was. Violet Carson threatened to resign outright. The actress playing Ina Sharples, Martha's sparring partner for over 3 years, became so outraged that only Lynne Carroll herself could persuade her to stay. Carroll was losing her own job, yet talked her friend out of walking away in solidarity. Peter Adamson refused point blank. The actor playing Len Fairclough was assigned to declare Martha dead with the words, "She's dead." But during rehearsals, Adamson flatly refused to say them. During actual recording, he deliberately hesitated before speaking, hoping his words could be easily cut in editing. Speculations swirled that the order to cut might come from Cecil Bernstein, one of Granada's chairmen and the program's strongest advocate, but no such order arrived. 2 of the program's biggest stars actively tried to undermine or prevent what they saw as a terrible mistake, and that's how wrong everyone knew this was. Episode 357 on the 13th of May became one of British television's most memorable and poignant moments, drawing over 7 million homes to witness Martha's final appearance. Martha had just received her first passport for a planned holiday to Spain with her daughter Lily's family. Trying to show it off to Jack and Annie Walker, she was interrupted by Frank Barlow's news that he'd sold his shop for 6,000 quid and was throwing an extravagant after-hours party. Martha attended in her best clothes, passport in hand, hoping to share her excitement, but no one paid attention because Frank's celebration dominated everything. Ina even warned Martha she was only going to Spain to be a babysitter, taking the shine off what should have been exciting news. Ina started playing piano, while a sing-along began with "On Moonlight Bay, I'll Be Your Sweetheart," "Down at the Old Bull and Bush," and "Waiting at the Church." Unhappy and unwell, Martha retreated alone to the empty snug, and her final line was, "Can I have a large sherry?" Sitting in her usual chair at her usual table, Martha suffered a sudden fatal heart attack. Her glasses toppled off her face as she died, while the singing continued in the other room, the revelers completely oblivious to what had happened. Myra Booth found her first, initially thinking Martha had fallen asleep. Jerry Booth alerted Jack Walker, who thought she was drunk, until realizing something was terribly wrong. And then Len Fairclough, despite Peter Adamson's protests, finally delivered the line, "She's dead." Ina was playing piano and was the last to notice. The singing stopped, the shocked neighbors silently returned to their homes, and Martha died, clutching a passport for a trip she would never take. That episode established multiple precedents for British television drama as the first on-screen death in Coronation Street history, the first on-screen burial in the series, and the first time the end credits rolled in silence with no theme music, just a poignant shot of Martha's glasses, passport, and sherry glass on the snug table where she died. Innovation came at too high a cost. Immediate and furious, that's how the public reacted. Viewers complained in their thousands to Granada Television, flooding the network with letters protesting the abrupt end to a beloved character. This wasn't passive disappointment, but organized outrage. Carol's earlier near riot at the Ideal Home exhibition had demonstrated Martha's popularity, and now that popularity manifested as anger. The talking point in the factories and laundrettes that Aspinall wanted became condemnation of his decision. The show's writers eventually acknowledged they'd made a mistake, but by then, Martha was buried and the damage was done. Unanimous and devastating. That's how Coronation Street's later stewards delivered their verdict. H.V. Kershaw, producer and writer, wrote in his 1981 book, The Street Where I Live, that no doubt Tim Aspinall felt that by such action he would bring the program a great deal of publicity, and in this he certainly succeeded. Kershaw added that by killing an established character, Aspinall doubtlessly gave us a few episodes of high drama and created a talking point in the factories and laundrettes which boosted our viewing figures for a period. But when the dust settled, we were simply left with a Coronation Street without Martha Longhurst. Kershaw's most damning assessment came when he wrote that the trio had been reduced to a rather sad duet, and there is little doubt that by that one action, many future stories were denied us. Bill Podmore, later producer, called it plainly the street's greatest mistake. Kershaw noted he preferred to remember Tim Aspinall as the man who introduced the Ogdens to the show rather than for killing Martha. Aspinall's tenure lasted only from May to September of '64, episodes 357 to 391, before he moved on. And his legacy remained the purge, not the programming. The program never quite let Martha go, though. Over a decade after her death, several storylines acknowledged her lingering presence in ways that showed she'd never really left. 1975 brought Betty Turpin hearing Martha's voice in the snug and seeing a woman in a beret with round glasses. Ina claimed to have seen Martha's ghost on several occasions. Residents used a Ouija board to contact Martha from beyond the grave, and the storyline concluded with Martha's glasses being found in the snug in the exact position they were when they toppled off her face as she suffered her heart attack. A voice clip from an old episode was used for these scenes, and Carol was not credited. Martha remained present, even when Lynne Carroll could not return. Carol continued working steadily after Coronation Street, though she never achieved the same fame again. Television credits included The Newcomers on the BBC from '65 to '69, multiple roles in Z-Cars, Nearest and Dearest in '72 as Alice Butterworth, Bill Brand in '76, All Day on the Sands in '79, written by Alan Bennett, and The Black Madonna in '80 as her final television role. Film work brought her a part in Yanks in '79, the John Schlesinger drama starring Richard Gere and Vanessa Redgrave. Tragedy struck in July of '65, just over a year after Martha's death, when Carol's eldest son Michael was killed aged 27 in an RAF Handley Page Hastings aircraft crash near Abingdon in Oxfordshire. All 41 personnel on board died during a parachute training exercise. Carol had married Herbert Newell Palmer, known as Bert, in 1934 in Bideford, Devon. Bert worked as a character actor himself, specializing in Northern English types, and later played 3 different roles in Coronation Street, including toy shop owner Joshua Hartley in '65. 46 years of marriage lasted until Bert's death on the 15th of January 1980 in Blackpool when he was 79. 3 children came from their marriage: Michael, who was killed in '65, Robert, and Jan or Janet, though none followed their parents into acting. Carol's attachment to Martha remained profound enough that she named her Blackpool home Longhurst after the character, showing how much the role meant to her despite the painful ending. Margot Bryant, who played Minnie Caldwell, died in '88, and producer Bill Podmore appeared with Lynne Carroll on the BBC's Open Air programme to discuss the possibility of Carol returning to Coronation Street as Martha's twin sister who'd been living in Australia. Poetic justice it would have been. The actress wrongfully dismissed returning decades later to a role the show had begged her to take. But the idea went no further, and the return never happened. Carol never walked back onto the cobbles. April of 1990 brought a hoax telephone call to Granada Television, claiming Lynne Carroll had died in a nursing home in Lytham St Anne's. The network reported her death publicly while Carol was actually visiting her family in Dusseldorf, Germany, and the false report caused distress to family and friends before the truth emerged. Weeks later, life imitated the cruel hoax. Carol suffered from angina and was hospitalized in May of '90 before dying of a heart attack on the 30th of June, one day after her 76th birthday, in hospital in Blackpool. The manner of her death echoed Martha's, sudden and from the heart. Lytham Park Cemetery and Crematorium in Lytham St Anne's became her final resting place. Obituaries appeared in the Times and the Sunday Times, remembering the woman who had helped launch British television's most enduring drama, bitter until the end. That's how Lynne Carroll remained about Martha's death throughout her life. She believed a terrible mistake had been made, and her character's popularity proved the point with thousands of complaints, cast rebellion, and decades of producer regret all vindicating her conviction. Carol had given Coronation Street one of its defining characters, transformed herself through second-hand jumble sale costumes, and helped create television magic with Violet Carson and Margot Bryant in that snug. The program learned of her firing from newspapers in return, watched a 29-year-old publicity seeker kill Martha for headlines, and Carol never forgave them. The program acknowledged its error. The writers admitted their mistake. Bill Podmore called it the greatest mistake, and H.V. Kershaw mourned the sad duet left behind. None of this gave Lynne Carroll her job back, or erased the humiliation of that newspaper announcement. Martha Longhurst's departure from Coronation Street offers a masterclass in what not to do when managing long-running drama. A new producer, eager to make his mark, sacrificed a beloved character for short-term attention, and the publicity worked, but at the cost of cast morale, viewer trust, and decades of potential storylines. The episode itself remains a triumph of television craft, with the bitter irony of Martha dying unnoticed during a celebration. The silent credits and the final shot of her glasses and passport. That craftsmanship served a terrible purpose, though, eliminating a character who had no need to die. Lynne Carroll deserved better. A sixth-generation actress who transformed herself into an elderly Weatherfield widow created something millions loved, and Martha Longhurst, the gossip in the snug, was British television's every woman. A pathetic old dear with acid on her tongue and disappointment in her heart. Her death proved that even beloved characters are expendable to ambitious producers. The trio became a duet. The snug lost its voice, and the street's greatest mistake became its most enduring lesson, showing that when you've got television magic happening around a table with 3 chairs and 3 actresses who can make anything funny just by being ordinary, you don't kill one of them off for publicity. 26 years separated Martha Longhurst's death on the 13th of May 1964, clutching a passport for a trip she'd never take, from Lynne Carroll's death, still bitter about the mistake that had cost her the role of a lifetime. Coronation Street learned the hard way that some decisions can never be undone, no matter how many producers admit they were wrong. And you treasure what you've got, because once it's gone, no amount of regret will bring it back.